Not every family gathering is built on warmth. Some are constructed around invisible hierarchies, unspoken but deeply felt. My name is Taran, and I am 27 years old. The night of my brother's promotion party was the first time I understood how fragile respect becomes when it is used as a tool instead of an expression of love. The evening looked perfect from the outside. Soft lights, polished tables, crystal glasses, and guests who admired my brother, Thomas, as if standing near him increased their worth. But beneath all that shine lived an old truth. In my family, silence had always been the language used to place people where they belonged. And I had never been placed beside my brother, only behind him. My father rose from his seat with a proud but distant smile and raised his glass. "We are proud of what Thomas has become," he said loudly. "Success, discipline, consistency, everything a family hopes for." His tone carried more than praise. It carried comparison. A message sharpened between the lines. Then came the pause. That heavy, pointed pause. Thomas felt it immediately. He turned toward me with slow confidence, enjoying the attention. "Are you the one he means?" he asked, voice clear enough for everyone to hear. "Or should I make it easier for everyone here?" The room erupted into laughter. Quick, careless, and cruel. But I didn't break. I didn't tremble. I met his eyes and said calmly, "Give me 30 minutes. You'll understand everything." Then I walked out of the room with steady steps, leaving behind the echo of laughter that had followed me all my life. To an outsider, this might seem dramatic. But in truth, this moment was built on years. Years of being overlooked, minimized, and quietly erased. Growing up, no one ever said Thomas was the priority. They didn't need to. Every decision, plan, and conversation naturally tilted toward him. If his schedule conflicted, the family's plans changed. If he had an opinion, it shaped the outcome. If I spoke, the room simply moved past me. My mother hid conflict the way others hide clutter before guests arrive. Peace was her priority, even if it meant ignoring patterns that hurt people. She smoothed over tension, redirected conversations, and protected Thomas from criticism more fiercely than she protected fairness. I learned early which parts of myself were acceptable and which parts needed to stay silent. My father valued calm, but his version of calm meant avoiding uncomfortable truths. And because I was the quieter one, the more adaptable one, the one who didn't start conflict, I was the one expected to absorb it. Silence became my armor long before I understood it was also my cage. But everything changed a few weeks before the party. My closest friend, Jordan, who occasionally worked near corporate data systems, came to me one evening with an unusual seriousness. He revealed internal financial records from the company where Thomas worked, records that were never meant to be seen by anyone outside authorized teams. What he showed me wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. It was a pattern. Losses reclassified as profits. Timelines altered. Reports adjusted to create the illusion of growth. And worse, Thomas's big, career-boosting project wasn't originally his. A colleague had created the core structure, but through slow document edits, presentation adjustments, and careful rewording, the credit shifted entirely to Thomas over time. This wasn't incompetence. It was deliberate manipulation. And my family celebrated him for it. Jordan didn't push me toward any decision. He simply placed the truth in front of me and stepped back. From that day onward, my silence stopped being a burden and became a strategy. I watched, I listened, and I waited. So the night of the party, when Thomas humiliated me publicly, he had no idea what I already knew. When I left the ballroom, I wasn't walking away. I was walking toward a decision that had been forming quietly for weeks. Outside, the cool night air felt clearer than anything inside that room. I sat in my car, memories and emotions rising like a storm I had postponed for years. Every ignored dinner conversation, every sidelined moment, every comparison, they all returned at once. And then one truth settled in me like steel. Nothing changes unless I do. I reached for my phone and called my assistant, Claire. Her voice was calm, steady, grounding, as if she already sensed the shift happening inside me. "Have you truly thought this through?" she asked. "Yes," I replied. One word. Unshaken. Final. And in that moment, The version of myself who had survived silence finally stepped aside for the version who would no longer accept it. Inside the ballroom, the night continued as if nothing had happened. People returned to their drinks, their conversations, their carefully practiced smiles, completely unaware that the celebration was standing on glass that was already beginning to crack. My absence didn't disturb them. They were used to overlooking me. But 20 minutes later, everything inside that room would shift in a way none of them were prepared for. While I sat in my car, the weight of years settling into clarity, something inside me changed. My breath steadied. My thoughts sharpened. And the silence around me, which once felt forced, now felt like control. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about hurting anyone. It was about truth taking its rightful place. I leaned back against the seat and closed my eyes for a moment. Not to rest, but to acknowledge the version of myself that had lived in the shadows of my own family for too long. Then I opened my eyes, feeling something in me rise that had been quiet all my life. While I prepared myself mentally, the ballroom inside continued to sparkle with false confidence. My cousin, Lena, would later describe every moment to me through a series of rapid, shocked messages. She said, "Everything felt normal, at first. Music played softly, waiters carried trays of champagne, and guests hovered around Thomas, trying to get a moment of his attention. Their laughter filled the room again, comfortable and thoughtless. My mother stood near the center of the hall, posture elegant, smile unwavering, as though the night had been designed to reflect her pride. My father looked content, his glass still half full, his gaze sweeping the room with satisfaction. Then, without warning, the large screen behind the stage flickered. A few guests glanced up but dismissed it as a technical glitch. Expensive venues always fought with their equipment. But the screen turned black, and came back on with something no one expected. Rows of numbers. Columns of financial data. Internal documents. Private reports. Clear, readable, impossible to ignore. At first, people tilted their heads, confused. Then someone gasped. Someone else whispered, "Is that real data?" The rows on the screen showed losses disguised as gains, revenue gaps, shifted timelines, everything Jordan had shown me weeks ago. And worst of all, the documents attached to Thomas's celebrated project revealed the original creator's name, quietly erased over time. My mother froze, panic spreading across her face like a crack in glass. She rushed toward my father, her voice sharp and trembling, demanding someone shut off the screen. But the staff reacted too slowly. My father stood still, staring with wide, stunned eyes, as if finally seeing something he had refused to see his entire life. Thomas, meanwhile, lost control of his carefully crafted expression. He moved quickly, trying to leave the hall, but hotel staff reached the doors first, locking exits to maintain order. Guests began speaking loudly, no longer whispering. What kind of company hides this? This is fraud, actual fraud. Was his success even real? Did he steal this project? Some took pictures. Others filmed. A few simply stared, speechless, as the polished illusion shattered around them. My mother's hands trembled so visibly people stepped away from her. My father's voice failed completely. The guests who once smiled generously now looked disgusted, curious, or entertained by the scandal unfolding in front of them. Lena wrote that the room changed in just seconds, but the damage was irreversible. The music stopped. The celebration collapsed. The admiration that once surrounded Thomas evaporated. The cake stayed untouched. The drinks remained half full. And nobody laughed again. When the screen finally shut off, no one knew how to restart the night. The air felt thick with judgment and disbelief. Lena's final message to me that night was simple. You weren't there, but everything you said became real. The next days moved quietly, like the calm before a storm. But beneath that calm, consequences were already shifting into place. The company launched an internal investigation. External auditors were brought in. Lawyers joined emergency meetings. Questions turned into demands, and demands turned into formal actions. Thomas's reputation collapsed faster than anyone expected. His suspension didn't come with sympathy. It came with silence. No farewell, no protection, no explanations. His name disappeared from project schedules. His influence vanished overnight. Mom's world shrank too. Suddenly, the friend she entertained so elegantly didn't return calls. Invitations stopped arriving. Conversations turned short and polite. She learned, too late, that many of the smiles she trusted were never truly hers. Dad's business partners began stepping away quietly. Meetings were postponed indefinitely. Calls went unanswered. Not because he had failed them personally, but because association with scandal was dangerous. And in the middle of all this, they reached out to me. At first gently, missed calls, short messages, hesitant emails. Then desperately, late-night voicemails, long texts, attempts at apology. But they all had one thing in common. They needed me only now that their world was collapsing. I didn't answer. Their words arrived like ghosts of the life I had already outgrown. Silence made them uncomfortable, but for me, silence finally felt like safety. I didn't owe explanations to people who never listened. I didn't owe comfort to people who never protected me. The truth had spoken for me. And for the first time, they were forced to listen. A week passed after the night of the promotion party, and the world around my family began to shift quietly, steadily, and irreversibly. Nothing exploded overnight. There were no dramatic headlines or chaotic confrontations. Instead, the downfall arrived the way truth often does. Silently, through official letters, forced meetings, and systems more powerful than pride. The company launched a full-scale investigation into the financial manipulations exposed that night. Internal auditors combed through data that could no longer be edited or hidden. Inspectors arrived with authority that didn't bend to charm or excuses. Lawyers began sending notices. Cold, professional, unavoidable. Thomas's suspension became the first public sign of collapse. There was no goodbye party, no explanation to coworkers, no graceful exit. His access was revoked. His calendar emptied. Meetings once shaped around him continued without him. People who used to hang on to his every word now shifted their loyalty to protect themselves. At home, the consequences struck even deeper. My mother, who had always believed social grace could fix anything, felt her world shrink painfully. Invitations stopped arriving. Messages from friends became distant, polite, or vanished completely. She realized, slowly and painfully, that many of the friendships she relied on had been built on status, not loyalty. And status evaporates faster than pride can catch it. My father's professional connections suffered next. Business partners postponed meetings indefinitely. Phone calls were ignored. Deals fell apart quietly. Nobody confronted him or blamed him outright. They simply stepped away, choosing distance over association. They were losing influence, credibility, and control. And in the middle of this internal collapse, they reached out to me. At first, gently, soft messages, short check-ins, attempts to talk. Then the tone changed. Calls came late at night. Emails grew emotional. Texts became longer, filled with pauses and hesitations that had never existed in their voices before. But I didn't answer. Not out of cruelty. Not out of vengeance. But because their words came too late, and only because they needed something from me. Thomas tried reaching out. 2. His first attempt was a missed call. No message. Days later, another call came, ending before the last ring. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know how to apologize. He didn't know how to face the truth that the little sister he'd treated like a shadow had become the only person who could have saved him, and she chose not to. By the end of that week, their home had changed. Lena told me everything through short updates. She said the house felt quieter than ever, but not peaceful, just empty. Like a space where no one knew how to speak to each other anymore. Shame filled the rooms more heavily than furniture. Meanwhile, I watched from a distance. Not cold, not vengeful, just detached. I didn't search their names online. I didn't track the investigation. I didn't ask friends for updates. I didn't need to. The peace that settled inside me didn't come from watching them fall. It came from finally understanding that I no longer belonged to the version of life they offered. 6 months passed. During that time, I built boundaries that should have existed years ago. I changed my phone number without explanation. Not out of fear, but clarity. I stopped checking unfamiliar emails. I stopped answering unknown calls. I stopped wondering if someone from my past would show up with a sudden apology or claim of regret. I no longer needed what I used to hope for. My life grew smaller, but in the most powerful way. Only a few people had access to me. My thoughts, my time, my peace. Mornings became quieter, but in a gentle, healing way. I woke without tension in my shoulders. I no longer rehearsed painful conversations or weighed myself against someone else's success. The sunlight in my home felt softer somehow, as if reaching a place that finally welcomed it. I understood something deep. Closure doesn't always come from a conversation. Sometimes it comes from leaving. I did not hate them. I did not wish them harm. I simply no longer carried the burden of waiting for them to see me. That waiting had shaped too much of my life already. One evening, while sitting by my window watching the city lights fade into quiet, the truth settled inside me completely. Walking away does not make you weak. It makes you free. And choosing silence does not make you cruel. It makes you safe. People sometimes say that distance is cold. That disappearing is heartless. But they forget that silence can also be strength. It can be a sanctuary. It can protect you from ever shrinking yourself again for people who preferred your silence over your truth. I didn't become bitter. I didn't become angry. I became unreachable. And in that unreachable space, I found something stronger than reconciliation. I found control over my life, my peace, and my worth. So this is the end of my story. Not a tragic ending, not a triumphant one, but a truthful one. I stepped away from a family that only valued me when they needed something. I rebuilt myself without their expectations, without their comparisons, without their noise. And for the first time in my life, silence finally belonged to me.